California is getting more and more Republican. Yeah, Donald Trump didn't dominate in California, but a whole bunch of other local races. Yeah. There's been a huge shift to the right. And even Donald Trump had a shift to the right in California. It's almost as if folks in California are living year after year after year with all this craziness going on. And they're saying to themselves, we've been voting blue all this time. Maybe, just maybe, there's another way. Hey, let's vote for Trump. Let's see what happens. Boop. Yeah, that's what you had happen. Let's get into it. Here we go. So what we're looking at today is we're looking at California's getting more and more Republican. We're going to talk about Californians reportedly preparing to flee the country pending election results. You know what I say? Good. Bye-bye. Even less libtard voters for the next election, right? Hey, see ya. Go to Spain. Go to Portugal. Go away. That's fine with me. 2 thumbs up. Let me know how it works out. Maybe move to, I don't know, Venezuela. I hear there's a lot of people coming here. I might get some cheap housing. I don't know. Give it a whirl. California took a surprisingly red turn on key issues, upending its ultra-liberal reputation. And finally, Trump's star rises as California shifts to political center. Even progressives have limits. That is telling, right? It's telling. There's only so many times you can do the same thing and expect a different result. And if you're crazy, you keep doing that. If not, hey, you go in a different direction. And more than 40% of Californians voted for Trump. State not as liberal as Newsom thinks, says experts. We're going to kind of run through the highlights of these. But one of the things that I would say is this is your candidate for the Democrats in 2028. He has been absolutely positioning himself as a candidate. Mainly, his main emphasis has been on hammering on cities to get their homeless issue under control, even though it's a statewide issue. Hammering on cities. I'm going to withhold state funding from you unless you get your streets cleaned up. Problem there is homelessness, not an easy thing to take care of. You got to either put these drug addicts, and they're mostly drug addicts, folks that are on the streets, right? They got a fentanyl issue. They got a whatever issue. So they are oftentimes convicted felons. So they've got drug problems. They've got legal problems. And then they've got psychiatric problems. These folks are oftentimes just because of the amount of drugs and how they started off abusing them. And now they're living in the streets. So unless you put them into jail, unless you put them into a psych ward, or unless you put them into treatment to dry out, all you're doing is just moving people around. And I don't know if you know this, but people can't be put down like animals, right? Well, we got a wild raccoon problem like we literally had here in Western Washington. Been feeding the raccoons for 35 years. I don't understand why they've just exploded in population growth. Yeah. Probably voted for the wrong side in this election as well. Donald Trump significantly outperformed his 2020 and 2016 presidential election performances in the state of California on Tuesday, while progressives were unseated as mayor of San Francisco and LA County District Attorney George Gascon. All of the races where folks were predicted to win in progressive type races, most all of them went sideways. Meaning, independents or actual, I don't know if I can say this, Republicans won some races. Good Lord. What is going on? 2024. What a year. The results provided evidence of what University of College London, UCL, political scientist Thomas Gift called a right shift in the Golden State. And by right shift, I mean right shift and right shift. It was shift for the right, which has seen Republicans making something of a revival. Well, I'm not sure if it's Republicans making so much of a revival or as the Democratic Party so single-handedly tanked their own campaigns and they went after stuff that aren't major issues to you and I as American citizens, like the economy, like inflation, like gas prices, like going to the effing grocery store. And you're like, how much? How much is this loaf of bread going to cost me? How much is this ridiculous block of cheese going to cost me? Yeah, stuff like that. As of 10 a.m. Eastern time on Friday, Trump was on 39.8% to win the Golden State, behind Kamala Harris for 57.6%. With 60% of the votes counted in. By comparison, Trump only received 34.3% in California in 2020 and 31% in 2016. So that is a shift. I mean, those are huge percentage points of just boop, 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 incrementally going up because, yeah, I guess people realize, oh, yeah, Democratic Party is doing nothing for me. Apparently, they worked out that not everybody's getting an abortion all the time. And that is not as significant as an issue as some would perceive. Now, people who are, all worked up about women's reproductive rights, hey, I agree. I think women should make that decision. Personally, I believe that abortion is wrong and I don't support it. But I believe women should be able to make their own call with their own bodies, just like I am, like with the jab. Hey, am I going to be able to keep my job? No, you haven't got the jab. You can't. Am I able to get on a plane ride? Take a ride? No, if you haven't had the jab, yeah, it's no good. So my body, my choice goes both ways. Know what I'm saying? So that being said, it's just not an issue along with trans rights. Now on trans rights, where I have a problem with that is trannies competing against girls. That's a hard no-go. Boop, no, not going to happen. Not going to happen. And then also, I want my girlfriend, I want my wife, I want my whatever, my sister. I don't have most of those things. I want them to be able to go into their local locker room at a gym and change out of their work clothes and change into their workout clothes without having some leering tranny in there going, I'm a woman. That's just nonsense. That's ridiculous. I'm going to come in here with my big, hairy, you-know-what, and I'm going to shave, and I'm going to, take a shower, and I'm just going to prance around. And you know why it's always that way? Because you never hear of a woman going naked into the men's locker room, do you? I'm a man. No, you're not. Yeah, see the up on top? Yeah, not a man. Down below, you got nothing. You got zeros down there. So that's how you kind of know that. So that whole thing to me, and then Tampon Tim with tampons in the men's locker room. I'm sorry, what? We're doing what? What happened? I mean, it's just absolutely crazy that this is even a thing. Let's watch this video here real quick.
Thank you, Lord.
Amen. God for real.
Thank you, Lord, for making America safe again.
2016 is when I started supporting Trump. He's sincere. He speaks his mind. Some people don't like the way he talks. I happen to like the way he talks. I think he's for real and speaks the truth. He's going after corruption within the government and needs to happen.
Freebird. Southern man don't need him around anyhow. Freebird.
That was my predictor that he was going to win in 16, was that the people started listening and he actually started to make sense to people. And then in 20, same thing was happening. My personal opinion, that election was stolen. But you know what? I think it worked out good because people really got to learn what this was all about. It became so obvious.
What became obvious?
Oh, men and women's sports, all this garbage stuff. I mean, how'd you like to compete against a guy this size? It's become amazing that, sure, there's people that think they're born with male genitalia that think they're women, but you know what? Why should we be paying for their surgery? And some of these people that are having their young kids castrated? My God, that doesn't make sense to me. Trump himself, you may not like the guy, but he he says he's going to do something, he doesn't. And you don't find that in a politician.
I like that he stands up.
So that was a Northern California resident in the Sacramento Bee. And just kind of giving their input on, castrating our young. And that is something that the Democrat Party has to deal with. They've gone too far. They didn't identify the real things facing Americans to the point where they just got shellacked. But hey, Californians reportedly preparing to flee country pending election results. Let's check this out. Los Angeles Times spoke to global migration experts who documented a spike in the number of Americans seeking to move out of the country since 2020. You know what? They always say that, but they just never do. They never do. They're like, I'm considering leaving. Well, leave. Go. Miley Cyrus. See ya. Bye-bye. Just, hey, leave. Just don't tell me about it. Don't virtue signal about it. Because you know what it's going to be like? It's going to be like Neil Young taking his music off of Spotify because Joe Rogan was on there. And Joe Rogan basically said, yeah, I don't really care about the trannies. Just don't. And people got all worked up because Spotify's got a bunch of trannies working there. And it didn't, it didn't make them feel warm and special. And it didn't make them feel like unique snowflakes. And so people like, Neil Young, he took his and a bunch of folks like him took their catalog of music off. But you know what? A few years later, yeah, they're not making much money because Spotify is a big platform. So, hey, let's get our music back on here. We need to make some more money. I mean, I got bills to pay. I've got virtue signaling to fund. And that's what happened. And that's the exact same thing you've got going on here. It's a regime like MAGA should win this election. I'm very scared. It just feels like it's time to enjoy a life that's free from any American worry. Well, go to another country and see how that works out for you. Because everybody's trying to break in the border here in the United States. They're not trying to break in elsewhere at the same rate at all, which tells you everything you need to know. But hey, you know what? Nobody's going to let the door bang in the ass. Why don't you just take a hike and, maybe come back and vote in the next election or don't? You know what I mean? So anecdotally, I've heard more and more folks talking not just about a Trump administration, but about the divisiveness in the country. Well, that's because Democrats went down this wormhole of just ridiculousness that most folks, as per the results of the election, agree with, which is, hey, Democratic policy doesn't make any sense for me. I'm going to vote for Trump. And they did. And that person was a migration specialist. Another migration specialist said his company saw a surge of Americans looking to live abroad after the 2016 election, but that number continued to grow during the Biden administration. We want out. We need out. We need to leave. California took a surprisingly red turn on key issues, upending its ultra-liberal reputation. Here's Kamala Harris. Today, I released my plan to help build a brighter future for Puerto Rico and Puerto Rican people as president. Meanwhile, at Donald Trump's rally, they're calling Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Kamala Harris, you focused on a whole bunch of nonsense like this. What you didn't focus on was getting your ass on to the Joe Rogan podcast. I don't know if you know this, but it's the #1 podcast in the world. Instead, you went to Club Shay Shay and you went to Call Her Daddy, home of the Gluck Gluck 9000. That's what you did. So whenever I see notes of what Kamala Harris did, I kind of think, well, how'd that work out for you? How'd that work out for you? And I'll tell you how it worked out for you. Joe Rogan had 45 million views after a couple of weeks. JD Vance had 15 million views, 11 million views, 12 million views, something like that. A day or two after he was on the Joe Rogan podcast. And Club Shay Shay and Call Her Daddy had a couple of million. On Call Her Daddy, Kamala Harris didn't even get 1 million views. A presidential candidate didn't get 1 million views on the main podcast she went on instead of Joe Rogan. Didn't even get 1 million views. That tells you everything you need to know, because nobody wanted to hear what she had to say. Her message was so, we don't know what her message was. She never really had. Tampon Tim, he just ran around crazy man on stage trying to convince us that he could shoot a gun when in fact he couldn't even load it. And then he said that it hurt his shoulder. It's like, come on, man, you're not firing a gun that often. It's a shotgun. Buck up, son, and, make that happen. Californians voted for some GOP-backed propositions and against some liberal ones. This is kind of continuing that whole thing that Trump gained a bunch, and a lot of the liberal ideology just went by the wayside. They voted in favor of increased criminal penalties and seemed poised to reject a minimum wage hike. Other blue states showed significant rightward movement on Election Day. New York was one of the big ones that had great movement to the right. Unfortunately, my state and Oregon state, they voted more blue. But what would you expect? We are the extremes now. We are the extremes. Seattle is an extreme. Couple of days after the election, we've got 10 people stabbed in the matter of 38 hours because you got some nut job convicted felon running around on the streets with a kitchen knife, and he leaves it in some dude's back because there's so many homeless people lining the streets of South 12th Street and South Jackson and 12th Avenue South in the International District in Seattle. That kind of thing goes on and on and on and on because we're a far left Democrat-run city trying to move to the right, but we're still such an extreme voting population that we can't seem to get it right. And you know what that is? That is a delay from California. What is happening in California now will happen 10, 15, 20 years down the road in Washington state. Housing, ideology, politics, all of that has felt the sway of California. So will Seattle one day wake up and vote for Trump? Good Lord. Are you kidding me? That's why my new tagline is going to be coming to you from behind enemy lines in Seattle, Washington. Because it really is. You can't honestly say what you want to here. You can't fly a Trump flag. I mean, good Lord. Could you imagine if I did that? Oof. Podcaster dead. That's how that would go, right? Even the bluest states in the U.S. were not immune from a significant move to the right on Election Day. Let's get down to it. Okay, Trump talked about Paradise Lost and Coachella Valley. Gavin Newsom's opposition to the measure, which he called a step back towards mass incarceration, around 70% voted in favor of the proposition. This is Proposition 36, which is kind of kicking back Proposition 47, which allowed, and that happened in 2014, it allowed the floodgates of criminal activity to open up in California. So even residents of California are pushing back. Meanwhile, Gavin Newsom, he has to protect his state because he's going to run for election in 2028. So he's got 4 years to clean things up because otherwise it's just not going to look good. I mean, people are going to take one look at California and go, we want him to implement that kind of policy all over the United States? Good Lord, I don't think so. But that's who the Democrats have, right? That's who the Democrats have. And then there was, let's see what else we have. London Breed lost. Incumbent San Francisco Mayor London Breed lost to Daniel Lurie, a moderate Democrat, political outsider. We've got in Los Angeles County, voters rejected incumbent District Attorney George Gascon. He was placed there by George Soros, billionaire who just hates humanity. Prosecutor known for being among the most progressive in the country, Gascon was elected in the wake of the 2020 racial justice protests. So a lot of what we are seeing here is a reaction to, hey, we gave this whole criminal reform. We gave this whole justice reform thing a whirl. We gave the defund the police a whirl. We gave the shitting on policing as a occupation a whirl. And you know what? We're going to go with that. Didn't really work out. Tampons in the boys' locker rooms, tampons in the men's locker rooms, men's restrooms. That's not really something that we need. Therefore, boop. Get rid of all that. Let's move on with reality. And that is, I think, what the 2024 election was in just basically, It was so clear, so clear. More than 40% of Californians voted for Trump. Think not as liberal as Newsom thinks. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, one of the things that I would say with this article and with the Democrat campaign versus how the Republicans ran theirs is the Democrats just basically had, Karine Jean-Pierre try and tell us night after night after night from the White House that the economy was great. Hey, we've got this and this. We've got this and this going. This has happened. And the rest of America was like, but that's not my reality. When I go to my fridge and I see that I'm having to cut down on food, and when I go to my pantry, same thing. And when I go to fill the, car up with gas, and we can't afford family vacation, we can't afford whatever, we can barely afford to pay our bills. That's on Joe Biden. That's on Kamala Harris. And they're giving us this message right back to us that, hey, everything's fine. What are you worried about? Whereas Trump is like, hey, I'm going to address inflation. Okay. Hey, I'm going to address the wide open southern border. Okay. I'm going to crack down on the whole tranny thing, which is ridiculous and only really represents less than 1% of the population. And yet the far left, for a split second there, at the same time, when they had that whole defund the police thing going on, they thought it was a great idea. Great idea. Hey, let's go down this road. Well, here's how I would say that ended up. How's that working out for you now? How's that working out for you now? Folks in New York City are just dialing up. They've got their psychologist. They've got their counselor on speed dial because they can't handle the fact that, even New York City went way more to the right than, it did not go to the left. And that is almost across the board. When you look at the map on, Trump built a cross-party, multi-party coalition. He's built a movement that crosses party lines. And that's why you had so many Democrats vote for Trump. And it's reaching people who have not benefited from the policies that have been put forward. That's the major difference. I mean, I always jokingly say, what's the huge difference between Democrats and Republicans right now? And when the punchline comes, which is, there's nobody trying to assassinate Kamala Harris. People just look at me and go, oh, good Lord. But it's true. It's totally true. Look at the hard reality. Look at the hard reality. And then look at inflation. Oh, look at all that. And the reality is people are just sick and tired of this nonsense that we've had for the last 4 years and being told that we're experiencing one thing when our reality is something totally different. And they're saying to themselves, hey, you know what? Things were better under Trump in 2016 through 2020. Let's give that. We don't exactly agree with everything he says, and he sometimes says stuff that, you can grab him by the if you got enough money. Well, okay, all right. They're far more willing to go down that road than, hey, let's pay for trannies in prison to get sex changes on the American taxpayer's dime. Yeah. Pretty tame. Grabbing them by the compared to all that other stuff going on. That's pretty tame. I know it's still not ideal, but it's locker room talk, right? I mean, Trump says stuff that he shouldn't, and he can't help himself. This is just who he is, and that is some of what people love about him as well, is he is unfiltered. He did a 3-hour interview on Joe Rogan. Kamala Harris could barely get through 25 minutes on Bret Baier before her people were like, I gotta go. And Bret Baier is like, literally, I'm getting a hard stop. I'm being told we are ending. So I hope you got to say what you wanted. And she's like, I have much more to say on Trump. Well, nobody cares because Trump spanked your ass. And we're going to do podcast after podcast after podcast. Let's keep going. All right. Thanks for being here. We'll catch up soon. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like, all that good stuff. I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.